That's it. Go comatose for me, baby.
You shut your mouth when you're talking to me.
Hold it. This is getting confusing. You didn't always hate each other? There had to be some nice moments during the courtship, maybe?
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. It's been a big week for Marvel Comics and Penguin Random House. This is the first week of comic book distribution since they signed their exclusive agreement. Obviously, we brought in John Leone from 616 Comics onto the channel, and he talked about his frustrations and his issues with his first shipment, which included 67% of damaged comics. Maybe it was 66. It was one or the other. 2 out of every 3 of every one of the comic books he received from Penguin Random House on his first order were damaged. And the issues that he had concerning ordering in the future. And he talked about how 616 often partners with other comic shops and retailers and does a lot of variant exclusive, retailer exclusives. You know, going through Marvel, that's a minimum of 300 or 3,000 comics ordered, no matter what you're doing the exclusive cover on. So obviously, there are 2 tracks that I've seen from comic retailers to do very well in the market right now. One is to jump into back issues and go to that market. The other is to heavily jump into the speculator market, which means getting lots of ratio variants, lots of store exclusive variant covers, which is one of the reasons that this Penguin Random House fiasco that's happening is so troubling, especially for a lot of the retailers that have chosen option number 2 to go specifically courting the speculators that are jumping in on new comics. And it's not just affecting the smaller shops. The biggest retailer of comics to the direct market, they haven't received their shipment. We've gotten a lot of feedback, and I will give kudos. I don't do this often to Rich Johnson and Bleeding Cool. They're one of the few sites that's really covering this heavily, going out and reaching out to a lot of retailers, getting comments, going onto their social media feeds, finding out what they're posting, you know, and getting a lot of information. So a lot of these quotes that I'm taking are directly from that. Obviously, I've already talked to John specifically and a couple of the retailers that I know about the issues that they're having, and these PRH issues are widespread. They're nationwide. There are some shops that have reported 0 damages, but they'll even say in their own social media that they feel, you know, it's like an act of God not to have had that because the shipping, the quality of the materials was so poor. And I've got a few issues. We're going to talk about some of these quotes, how some recent changes to FOC are definitely affecting this and probably making retailers a little bit more hesitant to continue on with Penguin Random House moving forward. And then we'll talk about some upcoming variant covers that Marvel's rolling out. Marvel is absolutely jumping into the speculator market with a lot of variant covers, a lot of ratio variants, and really gimmicking up their sales, which they're having to do right now. And why Penguin Random House dropping the ball so spectacularly could really affect their ability to do that moving forward. Now let's talk about the big news. DCBS, if you're not aware who they are the largest retailer in the direct market in the world as far as U.S. comic books. They are also Lunar Comics distributors, the exclusive distributor for DC Comics. There's two branches. There was DCBS, discount comic book service, all along. That's why DC courted them to be their distributor when Diamond shut down. And now so they have the direct retailer that services the market, and then they have Lunar that does DC Comics. And they have stated their intentions to join Diamond as a Marvel Comics wholesaler in the future. So when you think about what DCBS is, they are not only a consumer or a customer of Penguin Random House from Marvel Comics, they are potentially a competitor as a wholesaler in the future. And on October 4th, DCBS sent out this message. We are writing to let you know that the shipment of Marvel items coming from Penguin Random House has gotten lost on its way to us. It is currently being looked for, but since we have not yet received any of our Marvel items for this week, we are unable to start processing shipments. We sincerely apologize for the delay and that this is causing, and appreciate your patience. So obviously that's a lot of single customers. People do use DCBS if you're if you're kind of out in the boonies, or even if you're in an urban area and you have access to a comic shop. If you go to DCBS, they might have better discounts than even your local comic shop. So a lot of customers use that just people like you and I, but also a lot of retailers use DCBS specifically for reorders and stuff like that. And this is obviously putting a hamper on that. Is it coincidence that a potential rival that has signaled their intention to wanting to become a wholesaler of Marvel Comics in the future doesn't receive their first shipment from Penguin Random House? I imagine it is, but it is not a good look at all for Penguin Random House as far as one of the really big players in the market as far as retailers. DCBS did not receive their shipment. They are not the only ones. There are other people that haven't received their shipments. What we've heard mostly, though, are damages. We've heard a lot. This is coming from the King of Comics, who wrote on social media. This is very interesting. Half of my order was too damaged to sell, and the other half of the rest would be considered damaged under normal circumstances, but I need product to sell this week, so it'll have to do. Yes, Penguin Random House doesn't control UPS. Obviously, that is the entity that are actually delivering the comic books. But they could pack in a way to overcome shoddy handling like Lunar does with DC, which I'm going to talk about later on in the video. If I was a conspiracy-minded individual, I'd think that last week's double final order cutoff was to make sure stores had an extra week of orders in to make jumping back to Diamond just a little bit harder. That's a very interesting thing to point out from the King of Comics. What they are talking about is last week, Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing David Gabriel sent this out to retailers, and it said, "We are very excited to report that Penguin Random House's first week of shipping comics for the 10/6 release is well on track. Furthermore, we are working closely with Penguin Random House to minimize the impact of the logistical and printer capacity issues facing the industry." I'm going to talk about that with Perch in a day or two. To ensure you continue to receive reliable shipments, Marvel plans to increase the lead time between FOC dates and on-sale dates for most Marvel comics from 23 days to 30 days, adding an extra week to production to help mitigate any printing delays that may occur. These new earlier FOC dates will begin to apply for November titles going on sale 11/3, 11/10, and 11/17. Marvel will continue evaluating these production dates and share regular updates as needed. Now, what the King of Comics was saying is they had to do a double FOC order the week prior to actually receiving their first shipment from Penguin Random House. And he's insinuating, and I don't know that this is true, that perhaps Penguin Random House and Marvel knew that this was going to be Figmo, not Figmo, what is it? Snafu. Figmo's finally, I got my orders. Snafu's situation order all fucked up. That they knew this was going to be a snafu, and to add a double order in there to where people had to have an extra week of orders in there, be more committed to Penguin Random House, and perhaps giving them another week to get things right before going back perhaps to Diamond as their wholesaler. What this also does is comic retailers have a very hard time gauging interest in a lot of the stories that Marvel, specifically DC as well, that they put out, and at what to order, like for an issue 2, 3, 4, and 5, because a lot of times Marvel will do these weekly or bi-weekly, and you'll have to order multiple comics before you ever even see the sales of the very first one. By pushing it out to 30 days, you're likely at a minimum have to buy 2 comics before you see what the actual sales are. And that is actually going to be detrimental to retailers and make it even harder to figure out what the actual demand is for the product in their actual store. That's why we have FOC to begin with. Marvel kicked it back another week. Just happens to be just over 28 days, which normally a comic book that was monthly release would be on a 28-day release cycle. You get what I'm saying? Now, as far as the conspiracy that they did this on purpose, there are certainly a lot of paper shortages, and there are printer issues throughout the world right now. And there's a lot of issues, even if you get it printed, outside the United States, actually logistically getting it here on time. And we've seen that DC Comics has sent out a lot of messages and had to delay a lot of comics because they weren't able to get them printed on time. So Marvel has a legit issue that they brought up in the retailer message from David Gabriel, but the King of Comics makes a legitimate concern as well. It just so happens to have happened 3 days before they were scheduled to receive their very first order from Penguin Random House that you had to do a double order. They were not the only people to have issues. Retailer Ryan Higgins from Comic Conspiracy one of the more outspoken retailers that you'll find out there. Oh no, the PRH packing of Marvel Comics is bad. Really bad. Like really, really bad. Just normal boxes the same size as the comics, no protection. Most books in every box is damaged because it's shipped UPS with no protection. Exactly echoing the sentiments that John Leone from 616 Comics detailed here with all of the issues that he was having specifically with the boxes. He showed us an example. If you haven't watched that video, I definitely recommend it. Power Pack Nation also posted on social media. Diamonds had their shipping problems, but never anything like this. We got one box filled with basically kindling, one box that we'd never find acceptable from Diamond or Lunar, but in this case are reluctantly considering good enough just to have some product. And according to the website, there's a third box of some pretty major books like Immortal Hulk 50 and all the Star Wars plus some other stuff that they haven't even bothered to ship out yet. Just a disaster. Now that is crazy. I haven't heard that one there very often, but apparently there are boxes that were ordered that were supposed to be received this week. They haven't even left the warehouse yet. That is a disaster. And certainly for Power Pack Nation and any other comic retailer that experienced something like that would be exceptionally frustrating. And I guarantee you, David Gabriel and the Penguin Random House representatives have heard an earful from retailers because it continues on. These stories are all over the nation. This is what Rob Jensen told Bleeding Cool specifically. Not a single one of the boxes shown was even an iota acceptable. Even Diamond does better simply by having its custom boxes with slightly reinforced corners, which isn't saying much given that Diamond doesn't make the boxes big enough to pad with bubble wrap or styrofoam. But still, it's pretty hard to do worse than Diamond, and PRH succeeded at that failure. That is shocking. Diamond set the bar so low as far as distribution that the minimum, I think most retailers and even myself as a YouTuber that covers comic news, I imagined that Penguin Random House would have the logistical capability and the foresight to be able to do better than Diamond. And it looks like in a lot of retailers' minds, they have not achieved that. At least the Diamond boxes have reinforced corners, so when you drop the box over during its transit, you don't just bust the corner of every single comic book in the box. They're shipping them basically in the same boxes that they ship their books in. Comic books and books are not the same thing, people. And there is an inherent value to a comic book, specifically a number one, the first appearance. Some of these comic books are going to be very collectible and very valuable on the speculator market to collectors. And these kind of damages make them essentially worthless on day one. That's crazy, no matter how you look at it. This is what Gary Slaughter told Bleeding Cool. As a retailer, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. That is a bold statement, sir. I'm on with Penguin Random House as I throw this, and we're told, meaning he was talking to them, quote, dings and bends are sellable. You can't submit that as damage. And he says, and tell customers that to their faces. So he's actually gotten feedback from Penguin Random House trying to submit the damages to get replacements. And then he's being told your dings and bends are still sellable comic books, and you can't submit those as damages. Even though the comic book market really has changed a lot over the last 2 years, people are looking for pristine, undamaged comic books for their collections and for speculative purposes. This is an absolute disaster for retailers who thought they were getting an upgrade over Diamond. Crazy. This is what David Whites of All American Cards and Comics in Ohio told Bleeding Cool as well. We only had 2 comics on bottom damage, and the hoops they want you to go through to report damages doesn't make it worthwhile. They essentially want forensic evidence, and you even need to tell them the name of the person who packed your merchandise, like they're going to get fired if you do turn in a damage report. So that's pretty crazy. That's the first person that's really given us feedback on the process of reporting the damages. Apparently, when I hear forensic evidence, I'm imagining that's photo evidence. You need to have pictures of this on your phone or something and send it to them. And there is a slip. I've seen this in every one of your boxes that you receive from Penguin Random House with the pictures of the guys that actually pack the boxes for you likely, I mean, I would take that as emotional blackmail. Are you sure you want to report these damages and potentially get these two men fired who need these jobs for their family? That's the way I take it, right? Make sure you tell us exactly who packed those boxes. We sent you a slip. You'll see the pictures of the two guys that packed this. Are you sure you want to get them fired? Perhaps I'm being too cynical on that one. That's kind of the way I take it. This is crazy, and it's really across the board. This has been a nightmare as far as the rollout for Penguin Random House. I thought John Leone really succinctly covered the issues that he had, but it feels like this is much more widespread, and other shops are having even worse issues than maybe he's even having. So this has absolutely been an unmitigated disaster. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Marvel Comics are heavily invested in gimmicking up their comic book sales. They are going really hard in the paint on variant covers, ratio variants. I used to call them schemes before. I think that insinuates I don't know, like an underhandedness. I've been calling them gimmicks lately, marketing gimmicks, which is what I think variant covers and ratio variants really are. So I'm going to stick with the term gimmicks instead of schemes more, because I think it more accurately reflects what they're doing. But just a couple of days ago, they announced starting January 5th, rolling through the entire month, they were going to be releasing 5 variant covers homaging classic issues. Now, we know that Marvel Comics has had problems getting people interested in their new stories. And one of the things they've done is they brought back classic covers, maybe a Todd McFarlane or a Jim Lee, or we've even seen some Jack Kirby art come back on covers as variants, and those were very popular. So now they've gone with making new versions of popular classic covers that will sell well and put them on the comics that obviously they're not going to be able to sell. So starting on January 5th, there's going to be these 10 covers. Pete Momoko's doing Amazing Fantasy 15. That sounds awesome. David Yardine's doing Amazing Spider-Man 300-301. Will Sliney, Incredible Hulk 181. Mike McCone, Amazing Spider-Man 362. Kreese Lee, Journey into Mystery 83. Philip Tan's doing Captain America 100 homage. David Nakayama, Hulk #1. Stephen Mooney, Strange Tales 110. Pete Woods, Tales of Suspense 39. And Ken Lashley is doing New Mutants 98. Now, these would likely be very popular and very alluring to not only speculators, but collectors for some of these homage covers on comics that have nothing really to do with anything that's on those covers. But if you're a retailer, can you really afford to go all in on these covers? Knowing the amount of damages that you had, the reason people want a cover like this is to put in their collection. Nobody wants to go out and put something into their collection, of pristine, beautiful covers that's got corner dings, spine ticks, tears and things like that. This is going to kill the value of these on day one if Penguin Random House cannot fix these issues, which will absolutely destroy Marvel Comics sales and their ability to gimmick their comic books, which unfortunately aren't as popular right now as I would hope as being a comic book retailer. Marvel Comics need these variant covers to be hot and need the retailers to take the leap with them to know that they're going to be delivered in pristine condition for their customers that are going to order these ahead of time, and a lot of times maybe pay for them ahead of time. And the retailers need these kind of gimmicks to make up for Marvel and DC's lack of quality right now. This is terrible. I can't even understate what a disaster this has been. And this would have been very easy for Penguin Random House to see. They know what Diamond's done. They had reinforced corners and people were having issues. And they certainly know what Lunar has done, which has become really the standard bearer within the comic book industry. These were sent to me from John Leone at 616 Comics as examples of what Lunar does. First off, you can see these are sent by FedEx, not by UPS. But it's just a box, right? Like you would expect for anything else. You can see the corners a little bit messed up. They've been caved in or whatever. Certainly these comic books must all have corner bends, spine ticks, all kinds of damage to them. But you get to the second picture. When you open the outer box, you have an entire protective layer of bubble wrap before getting to the inner box. This should be the standard for shipping and distributing comic books within, the North American market. And this is the standard that DCBS, Lunar, has brought to DC Comics. Now, there were some people that had issue with Lunar to begin with, but at this point, I haven't heard anyone that's had an issue with the quality of the shipping material that Lunar has used for like 9 months now. John Leone said he's had like a dozen issues as far as damaged comics from Lunar in the entire year. It's crazy, but you can see why with the quality of the shipping material and the quality of the packaging that's done. This is the final one. You can see these things are absolutely pristine in nature. When you're going to open this box, the inside box has not been damaged. There's no way you would actually, you would have to throw it against a wall full of spikes to puncture this damn thing. If I know this, and the retailers know this, Penguin Random House knew this as well, but they decided to go cheap, just used the regular boxes that they were using for their book shipments and thought that would be good enough. That is certainly not the case. We shall see what David Gabriel and the marketing department and marketing sales department at Marvel Comics do about this, what Penguin Random House do to address these issues. But if they do not address it, Marvel is putting themselves in a very bad place. A lot of these stores are doing retail exclusive covers to not only get the retail exclusive, but it gives them more access to a lot of these ratio variants that are really what's hot on the market right now if you're selling new comic books. You cannot sell a 1 in 50 ratio variant that's damaged. You're just not, it doesn't make the risk worth it anymore because you're not going to get that premium price, which allowed you to invest on all those other comics that you're not going to be able to sell on day one anyway. It's been a disaster. Hopefully things get better, but I just want to do an update and some of the word around the nation and some of the issues being brought forth by comic retailers and let you guys know what's happening. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Obviously, if you haven't, if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you made it this far, that is shocking. Subscribe. You'll probably like the content.